Hello, Seahawk fans and fellow football fanatics. Welcome to the Hawks Nest. I'm your host, Hawkeye Kane, and I'm proud to announce this is our very first broadcast coming to you live from the great Pacific Northwest. The reason I'm starting this channel and my ultimate goal is to give Hawk fans a one-stop shop for all relevant Seahawk news. If you're like me, you spend a good amount of your time daily scouring the various sources to try to fully educate yourself on anything and everything Seahawk related. You've got your Reddit Seahawk community, field goals, Seahawk draft blog, your daily sports talk radio and KJR and ESPN, and let's not forget the rumor mill that's always spinning on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. What I'm hoping to accomplish is to take all of these sources and distill them down to a bottom line truth, or at least as humanly possible, as close to truth as we can get. So, fly atop the nest with me, and let's take a mile-high view of your Seattle Seahawks.
In the beginning, there was only loss in Seahawk Nation. 30 long years of losing, a trail of tears soaked in the dreams that never came true. But then, from the chasm, from the darkness of space, came Pete Carroll. Seahawk Nation, welcome to the Hawks Nest.
Now that we've got the introductions out of the way, let's move on to the real business at hand, shall we? You might think my first video here would be a 2018 Seahawk retrospective. And though that video is coming, that is not today's video. Instead, we're going to do a 2018 prediction. That's right, not 2019, but 2018 prediction. About a year ago, I recorded a video where I gave a sort of current state of the Seattle Seahawks Union, where I saw our current status and where I saw us going to. And though those words were shot a year ago, I still believe they have the utmost relevance today, if not more so in this very important 2019 off-season. So, let's jump on in our DeLorean, time travel back a year, and see what Hawkeye had to say about your Seattle Seahawks. Seahawk fans, my name's Hawkeye, and we need to talk. So, before we get to the nitty-gritty here about what you and I need to talk about, let's first cover who I am. If this shirt with the Super Bowl from a few years ago doesn't prove my fandom, if this customized Maui 12s hat doesn't prove my fandom, then let the picture of me as an 8-year-old boy with the old school Seahawk colors over my shoulder right here prove my stance. But even if further that's not enough to you, for you out there to say, maybe I was a fair weather fan, I hopped aboard once Carroll came along and the Super Bowl run happened. Okay, sure. Well, let me take you through what I understand in my history of loving Hawks, and I'm going to do it fast. I was a late 70s kid, so like the Hawks as I got into the mid-80s and consciousness took bloom. Loved Largent. He looked a lot like my uncle. They had kind of a doppelganger thing going on there, so it instantly made me like the team that much more, not to mention the fact Largent was the best, right? Right? Went through ground knocks, went into the early 90s with your Tom Flores and the horrible teams, the Cortez Kennedy as Defensive Player of the Year. Went into the Dennis Erickson phase of mediocrity and almost getting there. Then came Holmgren, of course, the great rebirth of the Seahawks. This was an awesome time for me. Enjoyed seeing us finally get to that mountaintop of the Super Bowl, only to have the officials steal it from us. And then we came to Pete Carroll, which is where we are now. Why I bring up my past and why I think it's so important to what's going on in the situation right now is because you need perspective. You always need to understand that what's happening today is not where it begins and ends. There is always going to be more. So when we take a look at Carroll and the Hawks and the current situation going on, Michael Bennett traded for a bag of peanuts, Richard Sherman released for nothing when we had a 1-year essentially flyer out on him, and further trade rumors swirling around your Earl Thomases and perhaps even KJ Wright. My argument to you out there in Seahawks land is that these things are necessary, and further changes that are coming down the pike are also going to be necessary. Nostalgia has kicked in to such a degree, and it's understandable. We in Seattle, Pacific Northwest, are a loyal people. So it's not in our nature to just cast you away at the first sign that you may not be what you were before, or you may be something completely different than what you were before. Unfortunately, when we take a look at this Seattle Seahawks team, I think the greatest comparison that you can come to find in recent NFL history is the Chicago Bears. And there was a documentary I saw of the Bears a couple years ago. I believe it was an ESPN 30 for 30, and it was on Netflix, so you can still check it out. And at the time, Seattle was just kind of starting to go through the downward phase of this run we've been on. And in watching the Chicago Bears 30 for 30, it became astonishing a little bit in how I could draw parallels between what happened on that team and what happened with our team. Specifically, why the Chicago Bears only won one championship in the 80s. Many people would say that that was the best defense of the 80s, yet they only got the one championship. They had a loaded talent on offense, only one championship. And even if I'm not mistaken, they only got to one Super Bowl as well. They didn't even get to two. And the thing that stood out at the end of that documentary is they were breaking down the reasoning why things didn't continue on that track that they had created was ego. Everybody wanted credit. Everybody wanted to be the superstar and have people appropriately recognize them thusly. And when that didn't happen, it caused schisms. It caused cliques in the locker room. It caused every man to suddenly be out for suddenly himself. And does this not sound familiar to fellow Seahawks fans? It's a common complaint about Pete Carroll. It was one of the things people whispered about when he was coming back to the Seahawks, that he's a player's coach. He's going to let the players run the show. They'll have too much control, too much empowerment, and that there has to be a sense of discipline involved. It's just the old school football tradition of things. Carroll came along and he really turned that upside down. He sort of gave the football community a glint that maybe there was a different way we could go about this. Maybe the new generation could accept this new way. And he indeed seemed to be very successful at it for the 3-4 year period there. Everyone was bought in on that team. You could see that they all personally took ownership. And it was a magical thing to watch, especially from a long-suffering Seahawks fan, Mariner fan, Sonic fan who, hadn't been to the mountaintop and actually, put our flag in the ground and said it's ours this year. So it was a great feeling. But unfortunately now I think when I mentioned the Bears and I mentioned that empowerment, what we're seeing is sort of, I think you can see where I'm going with this, but you're getting these two areas coming together, and now you've got a big problem because the ego manifests with the empowerment, and suddenly, it's the train's off the tracks and there's no getting it back on. And I think that's what you saw with them. Those players were aware that they had captured greatness at a very young age and could capture much more after that. But, sort of rather than that just being doubled down on, be a great football player, concentrate on this, don't let distractions come into play, it sort of turned into the opposite. It became about other factors and other things. And the size of the personalities and the empowerment became too much to bear. And that brings us where the football team is right now. And my argument is that this should have happened a year ago, that you could see the writing on the wall, that it was obvious the players were starting to, not listen. Of course, we can point to Richard Sherman with that as far as the sideline outburst with Atlanta, going after a reporter in that same year saying he was going to get him fired, going on the radio and talking about the quote-unquote kumbaya meetings that Pete Carroll likes to run. These are all kind of things that point, and not just to pick on Sherman, I think that there's signs you could see in Michael Bennett's and in other players that were signs that were pointing to not everybody being bought in as they were before. And I think that they tried to make one more year out of it happen. I think that's what necessitated some of those midseason trades you would never see John Snyder make for Dwayne Brown and the other guy, I can't remember who we got at midseason. Sheldon Richardson, who we got just. I liked both those trades at the time because I could understand what they were trying to do was just get one more year. But now the time's come. You're a year late. And so the piper needs to be paid doubly down. The interest is run. And what you're seeing right now is John Snyder paying the piper. The trade to Philadelphia, the cutting of Richard Sherman, the further deals that I think are going to be made. I mean, you're going to see Cliff Averill probably released or retired. It does appear that Cam Chancellor is going to be back, and I would say right now it's 50-50 on Earl Thomas. It's really just about if anybody's going to give us near the value of what we want for him. And that may very well happen. And I would be in favor of trading Earl Thomas. I think we were officially a couple years away from being a decent team again. And with that, you have to kind of not just reload, you've got to rebuild. And nobody likes that word. Everybody wants to believe that we're still in the middle of this dynasty and we have a chance. Look, we're not behind the eight ball like other teams would be in a normal situation like we are. We've got a franchise quarterback. Bobby Wagner plays middle linebacker, which tends to allow for guys to at least play till about their mid-30s at a relatively high level. You've still got parts and pieces on both sides of the football that are very interesting. Do we have the superstars, or will we have the superstars that we've had here before? No. But will we be able to field a competitive good team? Sure. But do I think that next year is going to be essentially kind of a punt? Yes. Make your peace with it now. Accept it in your heart. Let it breathe through you. We're not going to be very good next year. Or middling is probably the best case scenario. Sort of an 8-8 type team. And that's because they've got to restock. There's nobody we're going to be able to go get in free agency of any name. Maybe you can buy low on some of these guys and somehow they blossom for you. But unfortunately, after your Cliff Averills and Michael Bennett's, free agency hasn't exactly been great for us. We haven't been able to dip our toe in it as much as we've wanted to in the past, but it's not been good. So I think you're going to come back to the aspect. There's not a lot of money to spend. Other teams have a lot more money to spend. You're going to be going through C-level free agents. Help's not coming through there. We've traded away second, third round pick in this year's draft. Help is probably not coming in through there. It's not like you have a top 10 pick you're grabbing. You're at 18, and Lord knows Snyder loves trading back. He's going to want to get more picks. So we're really not in a position to build this thing back up really, really quickly. We've got to sort of let the money wash out. For those who've been paying attention, I think you can attest the last couple of years, as we've not only watched quality free agents go out the door and be signed by other teams as they pill for us, we have also seen our salary cap situation get pressed to the max. And we've had last year, for instance, with the Doug Baldwin deal and restructuring, and in a couple other restructures we've done, like with the Michael Bennett deal last year when we extended him. We've pushed the cap up way too high. And you've got to come to a year point to get out from under it where you just sort of clear the books. And in clearing the books, that means you can't take on more. And that's what Seattle's doing right now. We're clearing the books. We're refreshing everything. Let's go. And so I'm going to keep this video short and brief on that respect in this regard. And I'm going to continue to probably talk about this more and more. But I would ask Seahawks fans to have a lot of perspective on this when you get nervous or worried or angered by the moves that are going to be made here now and the moves that are going to be made here over the next couple of months. These are the right moves. It's the right thing to be done. It's ripping the Band-Aid off when it needs to be ripped. And it's not going to be pretty. And it's going to be sad. And you're going to get feels in your heart for the times that you're going to miss. But for the future of the Seahawks team, for the opportunity to take advantage of Russell Wilson's prime, you have to make these moves now. So in further videos, we'll talk about what is the next step. Where do we go from here? How do we move this ball forward? But for right now, understand, Carroll and Schneider are making these moves not to be cold-blooded or Bill Belichick-like. They're making these moves because the players necessitated it. The players went above and beyond where really they should have gone in a lot of different respects. And I know I'm being vague here, but I think that you know it when you see it, and this is a common thing you're hearing from NFL circles about Seattle, is that, essentially it's just gotten a little out of control. And to get back control, you're not going to be able to sit down to Richard Sherman and say, hey, you need to get back to where you were 2014. Or Michael Bennett, hey, we need your mentality where it was at when you first walked in the door here. You're not going to get these superstars with their brands and egos and foundations and Instagram followers to back up at this point. The only thing you can do is reset. And this is why Bill Belichick's done that in New England for years. This is why he lets stars go, because he understands this as well as anywhere. This isn't the NBA. This isn't baseball. This isn't even hockey. The players have a short shelf life. They've got a short time that they can be great, and then that time's over with. Nostalgia has no place. So Seahawks fans, put your nostalgia to the back, put your fandom to the front, and let's do this. This is Hawkeye Kane. Thank you for watching my video. Please do subscribe, and I'll be back soon. So I think there's some interesting tidbits in there to glean from and take forward, if you will. First off, I think I was pretty good in my prediction. I did say middling, but I also said 8-8. So I was 2 wins off their total, which is a little bit off. I didn't foresee them necessarily going to the playoffs this year, but I knew that there was a chance they could do it if the run game fit, meaning that if we became a sub-dominant run game, that could overcome a little bit of less talent on defense, that could overcome not necessarily having as many dynamic playmakers to throw to, and that you could come out to having a fairly successful season that way. And we did that. So that was a very good thing there. But the thing that I think I found most encouraging about this season, past the results, past the hope for the future, is that Pete Carroll and John Schneider truly did go through last offseason and truly have continued to maintain the stance of, we've got to renew this. We've got to recycle this. We're going to need to make it anew. And by that, I mean, we are going to need to be very tight in our contract extensions. We're not going to be handing out third contracts to players. We are going to be very mindful of our salary cap, getting back to a place where we can actually roll money over. And Seattle's done that. In the last year, how many extensions have been signed? And they haven't gotten Frank Clark on a sign. They haven't gotten Russell to a new deal yet. The only guy has been Tyler Lockett, and he signed it at just the start of the season, and now that deal looks like an absolute steal in retrospect, especially considering what receivers are getting now on the open market, because that market is going to blow up. Mark my words, this offseason. So the number one thing that I think you, and at least what I take from my video on that and what my thoughts were there, was that we are no longer holding on to the old. That has been thrown away. These years of just hoping we can squeeze one last drop out of the old guard is done. And we're going to move on to the new. And the good news is that that's what Schneider and Carroll do best. Probably better than maintaining a dynasty. They're probably best in this recycling of territory, this going through all players, the pushing for the competition, not just in words, but in absolute truth. And we saw that this last off season. We saw it throughout the years, throughout the year, and people who would start and not start, and guys earning playing time. Take a look at no further than the receiver that we had step up this year, who I can't think of his name. David Moore stepped up this year out of nowhere. Here's a guy who makes the team along with Brandon Marshall. Marshall, you've given some money to. Marshall's the veteran. And yet, by midseason, David Moore had taken his job. By midseason, he had caused the Hawks to believe they could cut Brandon Marshall without worry because Moore had proven himself. That's competition. That's the old school way of doing it. And what that bred back 4 or 5 years ago prior to our Super Bowl appearance was a hungry team of dogs. Guys that would just get after it. Guys that were fighting for every snap on that football field. And when you can create that atmosphere and you can truly, truly create that synergy, not just say it in words and platitudes, but actually actions, you end up with a very dynamic team because it's just not the way for all the talk of competition in the NFL, for all the talk of, the best guy wins. It sometimes comes down to how much you're paying a guy. It really does. And it's unfortunate, but it's the truth. So my quick summation thoughts, because we are going to do a 2018 retrospective video fully on the next episode, but my quick and dirty thoughts on this are that we are in a good place, not just because we're a better team from 2018, not just because we went to the playoffs, not because we had a couple of players develop, but because the philosophy has been re-embraced by the organization. And that is the thing that matters most. My name is Hawkeye, and I appreciate you watching.